Okay, so what makes you say that it exists, or he, she, whatever?
Well, I think a pretty strong argument is the contingency argument. So we can establish that there's a necessary entity. Do you believe in some kind of necessary entity or fundamental ground of existence? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, well, I can say that the beginning of the universe has a necessary entity, but not something with a will. So, for example, pointing something out with a will would be your God, especially. I can say that there is no need for free will. There can also be just something causing another thing.
Okay, so do you agree that some necessary entity is self-containing? There's nothing outside of it. Do you agree with that?
Self-containing? What do you mean self-containing?
That there's nothing outside it, so the only containment relationship it can have is with itself, so like a universal set.
Yeah, I know about this. It's just that I can make assumptions about it.
Okay, well, another way of putting it would just be like self-configuring. So any configuration that reality has to come from within itself. It can't come from outside of itself.
Meaning, like all of the characteristics and the attributes and the properties emerge from its own essence, not from another thing. So the essence describes all of its own characteristics.
In what way does contingency prove the necessity of a creator or a god or whatever you might call it?
Okay, I mean earlier you agreed that
Let's.
there's a necessary entity though. So I thought that right, I was addressing what you said about will, right? So you're saying it doesn't need to have a will.
Exactly.
Okay, so what I was going to
Exactly.
say.
So if, for example, let's say if a volcano erupts, the cause for it can just be some changes in, I don't know, in temperature or pressure, whatever. So there is no need for something to have a will to be able to choose from an option to happen.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just going to say that if reality is self-configuring, then what that means is that it has freedom, right? It has a global degree of freedom with respect to its own contents, and so the necessary entity in question has what you might call free will, because it can just specify anything that it wants. There's nothing outside it that determines it, so that would just satisfy the definition of free will.
How is reality self-configuring?
Well, if you agree that there's configuration in reality, and if you agree that there's some ground of existence, right, which contains everything, right, then there's nothing outside of that to contain it or to determine it. So the configuration aspect, the power to configure, is distributed over the whole of reality, and there's nothing outside it to configure it, so it'd have to configure itself.
But so every person has their own reality. That's the thing. You cannot know if what is really true, because the truth would be the convergence of those realities. So it's not self-configuring.
So you said the truth would be the convergence of those realities, but nobody would know the truth.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, but you've stipulated one such truth there yourself. So I mean, at the very least, they have to know that truth, right?
No, what I'm saying is, for example, if let's say if I see something, the only way I can acknowledge something is by my senses, so by empirical data, which is basically everything for me and for you. There is no other way to get to information otherwise than using your senses and reasonable skill set that you developed before. So if I see something as blue, it does not necessarily mean that you see something as blue. You could say that the thing I see as blue is also called blue for you, but in reality, so in truth, it could be just red, right? So there's nothing that can prove my reality and your reality to be the truth, but we can just compare it to each other.
But in both cases, there's still an objective reality that we're both pointing at. You might say it's red, I might say it's blue, but there's still something that we're pointing
No, we
at.
can, but we cannot know about the objective reality because the reality I perceive and the reality you perceive are just a depiction of the truth. So it does not need to be the truth itself.
Well,
People that have a syndrome which gives them the inability to see colors like red and green, they have a different reality from your reality. And if you would not tell them that those colors exist out of your reality, or that it is possible to see colors, even though colors are simply something that your brain is like perceiving, like colors are not there in a specific type. It's something that you perceive as your own reality. And those people that have this syndrome of not seeing other colors, they don't know that it's that colors exist. So it's not part of their reality, and they cannot prove it either because they don't have any point of evidence to say that, oh, well, actually, I had the ability to see colors, but I don't know if they exist, you know?
Well, it sounds like the very situation you're describing is one in which you've determined what the truth of the matter is, because in order to show that it's, just some kind of illusion, or that there's some kind of difference between subjects in what they attribute the truth to be, you have to actually show that there is a background reality against which that truth, that assertion is being compared, right? So, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of saying, you bring up the idea of illusions, right, or like differences in perception. But to determine that someone's perception doesn't correspond to reality, you have to actually show what the reality is first. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but aside from the things I just said and the things you said, even though we don't have even though we might say that we cannot know 100% about the truth, in what way is there a certain evidence for the existence of a God? Because, well, the burden of proof is not upon the person who does not believe, it's upon the person who believes. Since if you don't have anything to prove, there is no need for you to believe in it. For example, if someone tells you that they won an achievement in whatever, and they might be lying, which is not the truth, which you cannot. Let's say you can't know if they're lying or not. They're just saying, "I just won this achievement," and you're just taking it by the name. So, if they don't show you the achievement, and you cannot know and you don't have any evidence that shows that they never won this competition or whatever, there's actually no need to believe that they are in the right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If they can't show the evidence, there's no reason to believe the claim, right? But I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
okay. But I don't understand, how does this relate to what we were just talking about? So I thought that you brought up like relativism about truth against my point about self-configuration. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, even if you say we have an objective reality or a subjective reality, it does not matter at this point to be able to prove a God, actually.
Okay, I mean,
So you can also take your position of saying that there's an objective reality and just continue.
sorry, you're saying that we can. Are you agreeing that there's an objective reality?
No, I personally don't think that there is an objective reality.
Okay, but I mean, if we interact with each other, right? If you're, from your perspective, you're locked inside your own subjectivity, and and the same applies to me. I'm locked inside my subjectivity. Then any kind of interaction between us demonstrates that there's an objective reality that contains both of us, right? Because the interactions would serve as the basis for us to communicate or influence each other in any way.
Oh, you mean if there are, if there is any objective reality? I mean, yeah, but we don't know about the reality, the objective reality.
Okay, well, I mean, we know at the very least that it's consistent and that it supports each of us to have our own observations, so we can build a system up of true statements from there. I'd also say that logic is what allows us to do this. So logic has to have a systemic truth of its own. So I'd say that objective reality is logical.
Yeah, well, logic is the same for every person and reality, and it's just a concept of which is in itself coherent. So yeah, logic is the same, and you can also say that logic is part of the. Well, not yeah. Well, you can actually say that it's part of the objective reality.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. So, I mean, my point about the whole free will thing was just to say that if there's nothing that determines reality from the outside, right, so if reality is self-containing or self-configuring, it follows that reality has a basic kind of freedom, and freedom, the freedom to do what one wants is just what a will is, right? So I would attribute free will to the ground of reality.
I don't see how the first follows the second. So, you said free will is something we need for reality. I didn't understand what you were trying to say.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is that reality, at its most basic level, has a kind of generativity, right? Because it doesn't actually... reality at the bottom level there's nothing outside of it, right? So it's if you accept the idea of a necessary being or a necessary entity, right, something which doesn't depend on anything else. If it doesn't depend on anything else, then all of its rules and all of its configuration only come from it. Like it's self-generated. And to say that something is self-generated is to just say that there's nothing constraining it from the outside. That's what I'm saying. If there's no constraint from the outside, then it has its own generative freedom, right? And freedom, this idea of freedom, freedom from physics or freedom from mathematical constraints, those kind of things, that's what a will is. So I mean, there's other arguments that can attribute a mind.
Yeah, but again, how is it necessary for this when you just said it? For example, if something creates itself, how is it necessary for the thing that creates itself to have a will?
Well, it's from looking at what the attributes that it has, right? So if there's nothing constraining it from the outside, then it has this generative freedom, right? It doesn't have to follow any exterior set of laws, right? So it basically does what it wants. That's what I'm saying. It can map anything into reality that it wants, right? There's no constraint from the outside.
Yeah, again, but a free will is so. If you think about what a free will gives you, a free will just gives you the option to make decisions. How does the one follow the other? I don't get it. So, if something is if something is able to create itself, for example, like replication or something, how is there the need for a free will for this to happen? Because the replica itself can also just be without a free will.
Well, because right, let's take the example of replication. If it somehow
exactly. So basically, bacteria replicate themselves. They're like you can call them self-generating or whatever, but they don't have a free will.
We're talking about the necessary being, right? So if the ground of reality replicates itself, so for example, it undergoes through some kind of transition where it still exists in the on the output end of the transition. Then what it's doing is just it's discerning what it's going to become in the next moment, right? So it's distinguishing what it is from what it is not, right? So that would be a decision process, right?
Again, and how does this prove the necessity of God?
How does this solve the necessity of God?
Well, this is just something we cannot know about, right? It's just what is it called? I don't know the English word, but assumption, I think.
It follows from the relationships that are between constraint and determination, or metaphysical necessity, right? So if something has nothing determining it from the outside, well, there's nothing constraining it, right? So it follows from that property that it's capable of generating its own rules, right? Its own rules for example, its own replication, or distinguishing what it is going to become.
Yeah, but I just showed you an example where the thing that just created itself is not has no necessity of being able to of having a free will. So you have to prove to me that you have to prove,
right?
by calling it a necessary being, you're just assuming that there is a necessity for the existence of God. So, but we're trying to talk about it right now. So you have to prove to me that God is a necessary being, or otherwise I don't need actually to believe in it.
Okay, well, the example that you gave was of bacteria, right? But bacteria aren't they're not self-determining things. They're not omnipresent. They're not self-determining. They're not right. They're contingent things, right? They're not necessary beings. They're just they're localized to a particular point within reality. They don't represent the whole of reality. So, you asked me why is the necessary being God? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Why is God a necessary being?
Okay. Sorry, which way around are you asking? Because it matters, right? So you're asking why is necessary.
I'm asking in the other way. Why is your God a necessary being?
Okay. So I mean, if you take God to mean something that's omnipotent, then only a necessary being can be omnipotent, because to be omnipotent means that everything depends on the being, right? So the omnipotent thing. So if something's omnipotent, then everything that exists is dependent on whatever it is that's omnipotent. But the inverse of the relationship is actualization. That's what a necessary being does. Right, so the necessary entity is something which actualizes everything else, and typically we work out.
Oh, wait, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is your God specifically also all-knowing? Like, I don't know what it's called.
Omniscient. Yeah, it's omniscient. Yeah.
Omniscient. Yeah. Is your God also omniscient?
Yeah.
Well, because I also thought about being omniscient and what is it called? What was the second called? You just said almighty or
omnipotent.
Omnipotent. Yeah. Or being omnipotent, or being omnipotent and omniscient at the same time is actually not possible.
Okay, why is it?
So, for an entity to be omnipotent, there must. So, first of all, would you agree with me that for an entity to be omnipotent, it needs to have a free will, to have to be able to have the option to decide between two different options, and to have the highest possible power in order concerning the options. For
Yeah.
example, an omnipotent entity is able to do things we're not able to do. Like there is no physical limitation in the options. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
agree
would
with
you
both.
agree with those three things I just said?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I agree with them. Yeah.
Okay. So, and would you also agree that being omniscient also means that being able to, also means that you're able to know everything that's gonna happen in like every possible time,
Yeah, I do.
like
Yeah.
knowing what is going to happen in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so if those things were to the case, this is something I that came to my mind while I was also talking to a Muslim mission. So if that's the case, um, how is someone omnipotent if there's actually no possible options left? If your entity is able to look infinitely into the future and know everything, it basically has no other option left.
I don't understand why you say no other option left.
Because your entity, because the entity knows what's going to happen in the future, and it knows this for like for an undefined time into the future. So the entity basically has no option because it knows what's going to get into existence. For example, saying, let's say the one of the topics concerning God is like the creation of the earth and stuff, of the universe. I don't know if you believe in that too. I don't know, but if for this is an easy example. If your God is all omnipotent and omniscient, he doesn't actually have a choice to create the earth or not, because he knows that he's going to create the earth, and that there is no free will. Do you get what I'm saying? So an option involves a little bit of uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you don't know what you're going to pick. But if he's omniscient, he actually knows what he was going to pick, and what he's going to do in the future. So there is actually no power concerning your options.
I think no, it's more that there are certain things that God determines and certain things that God doesn't determine, and He can know things about what the outcomes are for different reasons according to whether God determines them or not. So, for example, God can design your mind so that you have free will, but He can also know what it is you're going to do without determining that that's the case. Right, so He can know what it is you're going to do because he's seen what you're going to do, rather than that He chose what you're going to do. Right, but then other things that are mechanical in nature, so stuff like atoms, matter interacting, well, those things follow rigid rules. So God determined those things, and He knows what they're going to do at every point, because God designed the rules, right? And it's not just that He's seen it, but it's because He actually determined that to be the way, but to be the way that the outcome will happen. But when it comes to personal decisions that are based on people's free will, those decisions are made by those people, right? They're not made at the time point that God designs the world, right? There's God's decision, and then there's your decision. They're separate decisions. So it could just be the case that God gives us free will, but He also knows how we're going to act, simply because He's seen the future, rather than because He has fixed the future.
But concerning the thing I just said, when I was specifically talking about the free will of the God, not the humans,
Okay.
how do you explain that? For example, the decision to bring humans with free will on Earth, you just mentioned. If he's omniscient, he actually knows that he's going to do this, but he in what way is there still an option left? Because the other option would be like to not bring humans onto this planet with a free will, or to bring them onto this planet without a free will. But he specifically, the first option was the option that came into existence. So how was there actually a process of decision making involved when he's omniscient and knows that he's going to put those humans on this planet with a free will? Do you understand what I'm saying, or is it still not
I think I
understandable?
understand. I think I understand. I mean, it would probably just be the same way in which we make decisions. Well, aside from the omniscient part. Yeah, I mean, when you make a decision, you do so for reasons. If God knows His own reasons, He has the option to go against those reasons, but He just knows that He's not going to. And it's more just.
I mean, can I? Do you have a problem with me asking in what specifically you believe, or do you don't want me to know about this? It's your decision. You want?
Well, I subscribe to the Christian God, but that's not for the reasons that we're currently talking about.